So, folks, you are tuned to Drive the Lightning, the positively charged EV channel.
We are here with N. Bruce Nelson, Aptera ambassador. In fact, he is number 42 in pre-order line to get his Aptera. Also, he's the founder of r/Aptera Motors. That's the subreddit for Aptera Motors, where we have, Sarah, would you say, lively discussions?
Yes, lively.
About Aptera.
Sounds good.
Yeah, everything from, what color are the seats all the way to how are they ever going to get a 1,000-mile range battery into that thing. All those discussions happen there, and the link to that will be in the description. Also, he's the host of Iowa Aptera on YouTube.
Right.
Which, full disclosure, our favorite Aptera material comes from Bruce Nelson. Bruce, thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you very much, and you flatterers, you.
Well, that's not the intention. We try to be honest and positive. I think we hit both of those marks.
I think we got it. I think we got it right.
Bruce, would you give us just a little bit of your background? Because I know you're a bit of an environmental, at least conscious, if not an activist, but also you have been involved in EVs for a very long time.
Well, you can see this gray hair. I actually went to the first Earth Day in 1970, and so environmental issues were kind of on my radar for a long time.
Yeah, that was 52 years ago.
Yeah, my first direct work with EVs was probably when I lived in Japan. I got married in 75 and we moved to Japan, and I taught English for a EV company called Nippon Yusoki, and they mainly made mining locomotives and milk carts and things like that, milk delivery carts. But they also did work for other things. And one day I was idly thinking about whether an electric motorbike could have the range to get from where I lived to the company to commute. I was about 35 miles away. And one of the younger engineers started thinking about that, and they actually designed a motorcycle for me.
Wow.
And I started collecting parts. But in Japan, I would have had to have had the maker of the frame certify their frame for the use, and there was a whole lot of stuff. And those guys were so into it, they would have done it. But when I realized it was going to be costing tens of thousands of dollars that they'd be investing, and I didn't see a real return back then, so I said, well, we won't do that. But that was my first encounter.
And then from there, at some point, you made it back to the United States to work. And if I'm not mistaken, I think I heard you say in one of your videos, you were working right across the street from when they were starting to develop the first Aptera prototypes.
Yeah.
First Tesla prototypes, not
first
Aptera.
Tesla. Yeah. There was a little company in San Francisco that had I was the sixth employee, I think, but they had developed the first ozone-friendly refrigeration system. And so I joined them. And while I was there, I was able to introduce the first non-global warming refrigeration system to the US EPA. And we grew a great deal. We ended up moving to Union City, and that's where Tesla was getting started across the street. Well, Tesla had some real funding issues, and they had to lay off all their motor engineers, and we hired them.
Yeah,
so
good.
I got the inside story about what had been going on at Tesla. And at the beginning, they were just doing a rather simple EV conversion of the Lotus Elise. And at that time, which is around 2008, they were breaking the transmissions with every demo ride. They weren't telling customers or investors that.
Smart. Now, Bruce, that's the car that became the original Tesla Roadster. Is that right?
The Roadster. That's
okay.
Right. And so, having seen that and comparing it to Aptera now, Aptera is way ahead with a far more complex project than Tesla ever was at that time, and not only financially but also in technical progress. So people just don't. If you go back and read what Elon Musk has written about the time, he talks about that. And one of the things I talked about was they were within 1 hour on December 24th of 2008 of completely shutting down when they got a surprise $40 million investment.
Phew.
They came really close, and Aptera has been able to manage their financing much more carefully.
Yeah.
I think if you notice, they laid off 18 people, which is keeping their financial burn rate within the area that they should. I should have gone online before this started and seen what the Republic fundraising is at, but it was
Well, we could do that right now.
70. Let's see, well over 700,000 the last time I looked.
I'm going to look it up right now. Okay, Bruce, I just looked it up. We're at 752,115. And today is Tuesday, the 3rd of January at about 3 p.m. Eastern. So, like you said, that's really taking off.
Yeah.
And I love that crowdfunding, Bruce, because I feel like I get to have a part in something. And you told me you're an early investor too.
Yes.
Like we're a part of this Aptera project. You know, we've put our money in to say we believe in this and let's make it happen. It feels good.
I consider an investment in an early stage company like Aptera the way I do other charitable contributions. I don't necessarily expect to get the money back, but I make it because I think it's going to help push the world in a direction that I want to see happen. And I think at this stage, Aptera is kind of the same way. Aptera has already, I think, been the most successful crowdfunding company in history. So there's a tremendous amount of support there.
Let's go back a little bit, Bruce, if we can, because we just escaped 2022. Okay, and Aptera had some humongous moves in 2022. Sarah and I experienced some of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, so can we just talk a little bit about 2022 Aptera, and then we'll talk about the future? What stood out to you?
Judy and I live in Iowa right now, but we were living on a boat in San Francisco Bay for about 20 years. And before we left, we drove down to San Diego and visited the Aptera site. We saw the factory, and we saw all of the prototypes, which at that time, the 3 alphas and the beta. And Judy and I actually got rides in the Luna Alpha, the silver one.
Nice.
Which I didn't expect. And Audra and Quincy were wonderful hosts. And Daniel Morris, the engineer, took some time out to give me quite a spirited ride, I have to say. People were concerned about the road bumps. He hit one, I think, around 30 miles an hour.
Oh my!
Wow!
Quite a jolt, but it didn't cause any issues with the vehicle. So I was really excited about that and experiencing the acceleration and that kind of thing.
And much later, we had the same experience. We both got a ride just this past September in the same one you rode in. And I'm telling you, Bruce, you know, and this is going to sound naive, if that was the car they released, I would buy it, the Alpha. And now since then, they've had the beta test proving car, and of course the Gamma. You know, so this come a long ways.
Well, that Alpha was noisy and rough, but it wasn't any worse than a Volkswagen kit car I used to drive.
Right, exactly.
But the acceleration was far more than I ever expected.
Yeah.
It's 0 to 60 is almost twice as fast, and this is the 2 motor version.
Right, that's right.
Compared to my Gen 1 Honda Insight. So it's really an exciting vehicle, and I can hardly wait for that. The other thing that was really nice was I asked if I could sign an NDA, and so Daniel was then willing to answer some of the technical questions about development that, of course, partly because of that, I haven't spoken about publicly, but it certainly helped me understand some of the engineering behind it that was quite new. And as this last year's gone on, we've seen the developments, and now most of that information is public.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll bet that was exciting. I mean, just learning about it in small doses like we have, it's hard enough to keep up with. I can't imagine listening to the engineer person to person dropping all that on you at one time.
Well, one of the things I was doing was at the company I was working for was thermal engineering. In fact, I designed and helped build a refrigeration system that flies on the International Space Station. So
Oh, wow, cool.
I did a lot of specialized thermal stuff. And one of the interesting things I'm eager to find out about is with the new body design being made by CPC, that's going to change some of the thermal characteristics of the body. Now, I don't know how much. It may end up not being a big thing, but it does mean that there's a lot of new testing to match how the cooling as it had been designed, both the batteries and the wheel and the cabin cooling, to make sure that that's all going to perform the way that they expect. So doing the new design of the body is definitely causing a lot of the systems to have to at least be recalculated and revisited.
Yeah. You know, before they even got to that Delta design you're talking about, they have partnerships in place for everything. You mentioned CPC for the bodies. That's made it a company that makes supercars, right? Like Italian sports cars.
Yeah, CPC builds the Lamborghinis, for instance,
Yeah.
and they've also been working with BMW and Ferrari and many of the European vendors. Actually, it turns out that Sandy Monroe introduced Aptera to CPC quite some time ago, and it was kind of a surprise. But starting out, Aptera was finding that their order quantities were too small for a lot of the US and Asian companies to be able to really seriously consider. But for the Europeans, they're often on the upper side. And so it turned out a lot of the European suppliers were a perfect fit for what Aptera was doing.
Well, surely they're used to limited run vehicles, right? Like these supercars, they don't make millions of these. You know, that's what makes them
exactly
so interesting.
But CPC had invested in these huge 5,000 ton presses to press body sheets, and they're going to be able to do hundreds of thousands if necessary, you know, if the numbers climb to that point. So it means that Aptera is going to be able to ramp production as quickly as they need to. Right. And I think that that's very exciting. The one thing that we're all on pins and needles waiting to hear is that making these toolings for these presses is millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And that's why Aptera needs to raise another 50 million or so that they would not have had to do if they were still continuing with the low volume production method, the vacuum resin infusion that they had been planning on.
That's a great point, Bruce, because what you just said there clears up some of the delays, as people call them. Some of it's supply and demand, some of it's world conditions, a war in Europe, but also the switch to a superior production costs more money to get started.
Yeah, a lot more.
Yeah, so we may have seen Aptera in 2022 if it wasn't for the trade, but the switch to CPC is going to make this a better car that can ramp quicker and get more of them on the road, I think.
Yeah, I agree. You know, I would have had a vehicle possibly even around now if they kept on with the old system. But if you've been around vacuum resin infusion, you know that the precision of the parts isn't tremendous. But with the CPC thing, they can stamp out the pieces and then use a laser to just make the precision of each part absolutely incredibly precise. And it means that we're going to be getting, even though it's delayed, we're going to be getting a far better vehicle than we would have. So I'm really excited about that. And for people towards the end of the line, because of the speed at which they'll be able to produce, they'll be getting their vehicle sooner.
That's right.
Yep, that's a good way to look at it.
Yep. We'll be right back with more of our conversation with Bruce Nelson. But first, we need to say thank you to some people. That's the members of this channel, because you're the ones that keep the wheels churning on the Positively Charged EV channel.
Yes, thank you.
And also the Mug Club.
Yes.
How cool are these folks? Because
So cool.
as Sarah likes to say, you mugs are buying mugs so these mugs can get to San Diego for some more in-person Aptera coverage on this channel. Thank you.
Yes.
Hey, let's have a look at the map.
Yeah.
Sarah, what do you notice when you look at Canada?
There's only one mug in Canada
What's
so
up,
far.
Canada? We love Canada. And we got some new members in the U.S., in Alabama,
Yep.
and
And
where
Paris.
else? Paris what?
Paris, Tennessee.
Paris, Tennessee. So thank you for joining the Mug Club. And here are all of the mugs spread out all over the country of those who are supporting our efforts to get better in-person coverage of Aptera Motors solar electric charged vehicle.
Yes. Thank you all so much. We really appreciate your support.
Yep. And for those of you who are watching that haven't subscribed yet, why? It doesn't cost anything. Just hit the button if you would. If not, that's cool. Enjoy the show. Back to Bruce Nelson.
Bruce, you were saying that the integration of CPC with the production is going to ultimately result in a higher quality build, as well as the ability to ramp up production faster once it gets rolling. So they've recently released their plans for Delta. We got to see the render. What do you think the next step is for Aptera? What do they do next?
Well, of course, the first critical step is to get the significant funding that they still need to do to start production. That needs to come in order to produce these molds that are going to be used in the stamping machine. And I understand that's around $50 million for that part. The money that's coming in from the crowdfunding now will help keep the company going with their expense run rate during that time. And the SEC reports show how that's going. We should be seeing another one in the next couple of months as well, so people can independently judge. But it looks like Aptera is avoiding some of the problems that companies like Sono have run into in their fund management. So I'm really happy about that. Once they begin to do some test stampings, they're going to be able to produce vehicles that will be used for crash testing. Aptera does not legally have to crash test these vehicles because of the class they're in. However, they're going to use a third party to voluntarily to crash test these early production samples to the Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards, Part 200, if you want to look up and see what those tests are. And then they will voluntarily release the results. If you actually go and look, you'll see that many of the vehicles, that, especially SUVs that are sold this last year in the US, have not been through that physical crash testing process.
Really? I would have never thought that.
Because they're produced in low volumes, relatively low volumes, and they don't hit that threshold. So I was really surprised to find that. But they look at the virtual crash testing, which Aptera has been doing literally thousands of times as the design has evolved, and that's no different from many of the new cars that are on the road right now. People don't really make that comparison, but that's actually the case.
I never knew that.
Aptera has been very careful in the safety area, and I think in addition to efficiency, that's the other primary design imperative.
You know, the other thing about what you just said that reminded me of is they're not required to have airbags either.
No.
Because if it's a motorcycle, motorcycles don't have airbags. Motorcycles don't do crash testing. So there's a lot of extra time that's going in and money on the front end, in my opinion, to make this a vehicle that can scale and last and maybe even change or create a new classification.
Yeah, they for sure have not been designing to a lowest common denominator in any of these things. And some of the features that people point their fingers at, recently I've seen some discussion about, those, when you're parking, those extended wheels are going to get nicked by drivers that aren't paying attention. But what would you rather have, a vehicle that doesn't turn over in violent maneuvers, or one that might occasionally get a nick on the on the wheel pad? You know, it's a matter of any engineering problem has balancing the features with the returns. It's always plus and minuses. And for the stated purpose of Aptera, I think they're really making some wise choices here.
Yeah, I'm impressed. Yeah,
Yeah.
one thing we learned about that I would love to hear your take on recently is the fleet division. It showed up first on their website, like mysteriously, like, what does this mean? Fleet sales. But then we heard about some real progress at the very end of last year.
Yeah, Aptera has already taken some fleet orders. And so I think it caught them a little bit by surprise. They're now trying to decide what their criteria is going to be. They're leaning towards a minimum of 5 vehicles for a fleet order. And we're going to see some specialized production just for fleet sales. And of course, that's going to help increase the volume of sales. And because those tend to come from corporations, in fact, by definition, I think it needs to be a corporate buy. There's going to be tax implications and the possibilities of additional funding sources too.
One thing we saw recently that really helped us to kind of click with what fleet sales can mean is the Chevy Bolt that's being used by Domino's Pizza. We saw a big
Exactly.
line of those all decked out with the Domino's decals, and both Sarah and I instantly thought, what?
We need to order from Domino's more.
Yeah, and the other thing, and
I need more pizza.
I think it's a real value add to some of these corporations. It's a big deal.
Well, certainly, what if you compare even with a Volt, which is actually very good, but if you still compare the running costs, cheaper tires, solar input, if they, depending on what part of the country they are, if they decide to order it. I don't know, I haven't figured the numbers for Michigan, but for many people, that's going to have a significant lower cost per mile, which goes right to the bottom line of the person who's driving it.
Absolutely. That efficiency to a corporation means so much more than it would to me. Like my dollar to use the Aptera will be less than our Nissan Leaf.
Yes.
But nothing like if I had a fleet of 100 vehicles for like Best Buy Geek Squad or whatever, driving all over the city and gathering sun in free miles and almost no maintenance. It's a really big deal, in my opinion, the fleet sales.
Yeah, just look at what the airlines will do for, a couple % increase in efficiency. And there's a lot of potential customers for Aptera that will find these same advantages. So it's another really exciting point for it.
I experienced that, Bruce. I used to work for Delta Airlines, and we got a memo from corporate when we would push the planes back for takeoff. We would usually push them straight back, and then the pilot would crank the wheel, power his way out. And then they said, push it back on an angle so the pilot just goes straight, and we saved hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. What took
that interesting?
zero time. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the Aptera, when we start driving that, is going to change all our lives in ways that we hadn't really imagined. And of course, we're going to be seeing tens of thousands of tons of carbon dioxide that otherwise would have continued going into the air to no longer be headed that way. And so even for people who don't buy Apteras, they're going to see follow-on benefits because of the people who are, because of the reduced use of resources and the lower environmental destruction from our normal activities.
Yeah, for sure.
So having looked at the render of Delta's design, was there anything particular that stood out to you separate from Gamma that got your attention?
I'm still letting a lot of that circulate. Of course, as I mentioned before, the thermal consequences of the design are the things I'm most interested in. And I'm actually looking forward to January 20th for the webinar, which I think we're going to see quite a few new pieces of information. It sounds like they're going to be announcing some of the special features that are going into the Paradigm editions. And I'm especially interested in that because I'm signed up for one.
Yeah. What's your order number again? Pre-order number?
It's 42.
42.
Yeah.
Woohoo!
If you're Doug Adams fans, you know what that means.
Right, that's right. If you're willing, Bruce, we can trade our order numbers right now, sight unseen. I'm somewhere,
I don't think that's going to work out for
he's
us.
42, but we're like 13,000.
Well, I see a trip to Michigan in my future as soon as I get it picked up, and
Yes,
to visit you two and your mom at the very least.
that's a requirement.
Yes,
That's a
we're looking
requirement.
very forward
Yeah.
to that.
We're
Yeah,
pretty
we're going to
easy.
be looking for excuses to drive as much as we can, so
Good.
that'll be one of them.
We're pretty easy to stay friends with, Bruce, but that one's required. So if you value our friendship as much as I value our friendship, we'll be seeing you in Michigan.
Well, I just want to say that for me, besides my geeky interest in the engineering, that the social connections that are forming around Aptera through the ambassadors, through customers, various online media are just a tremendous enjoyment for me. And it's one of the real reasons that I'm glad that I became involved with Aptera, is just people like you that my wife and I get to meet.
We feel the same.
We do. We really find the Aptera community to be sunny, positive, cheerful, bright, and with a forward-looking view. It's really exciting to be a part of it.
Thank you, Bruce.
We appreciate it. Your
so much.
insights are really enlightening and interesting and offer a lot of hopeful perspective. And
Well, my insight's getting kind of old now. It's time to replace it with an Aptera.
I bet your inside insights.
I know. You just left an opening and I take those. Thank you so much.
We appreciate you.
Yeah.
Keep up the good work and we'll see you soon.
Okay.